Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Poon, and we are just going to wait a couple of minutes while we let everyone into the room. While we wait, I wanted to share with you some of the exciting events and opportunities that we have happening at SAR. So next Wednesday, we will be hosting the second installment of the IARC Speaker Series. Curator Erin Joyce and artists Ian Kuli'i and Marie Watt will be discussing a new era for Indigenous art in museums. Then, the very next day, Thursday, March 18th, journalist and author Anna Merlin will be speaking about Republic of Lies, how conspiracy theories took over American public life. As always, you can register for any of these events by visiting our website at sarweb.org. SAR has also been hosting a series of in-depth courses. This year, all of our courses are hosted online, and while the live versions of the courses are full, we are now offering the option to purchase the recorded sessions for $50. We've just concluded a course with Dene Weaver Venancio Aragon about the history of Navajo weaving and his contemporary work. And coming up, archaeologist Steve Luxon will lead a course on the archaeology of Chaco Canyon. Finally, I wanted to let you know that we recently launched a new membership program at SAR. Our virtual membership offers new members a way to get involved for just $25 a year. This membership level welcomes you into all of our online programming, and your support keeps SAR's online programs accessible and free of charge to a broad and diverse audience. Okay, let's get started. So for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Alicia Poon, and I'm the director of SAR's Indian Arts Research Center. I am so pleased to be coming to you from Tewa lands in Ogopoge, Owenge, also known as Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I welcome you to the start of the 2021 speaker series, Museums Pivot, Shifting Paradigms for Collaboration. This year, we are so very excited to be hosting a series of conversations which will explore efforts to foster collaboration between museums and communities. Over the years, documents like SAR's Guidelines for Collaboration emphasize the critical importance of community input and partnerships within the museum field. Museums Pivot highlights the history that led to this moment and current innovative partnerships, but also explores the potential of virtual and remote collaboration in the midst or wake of a global pandemic. This month, we are celebrating the successes the field has witnessed as museum professionals, community members, and artists have pivoted and adapted. But we also acknowledge and embrace the work that still needs to happen. In this series, we will hear from presenters who speak to their past experiences, as well as share how they envision the future of community collaboration. So with that, I wanted to thank you, each and every one of you, again, for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over now to our Curator of Education, Felicia Garcia, who will introduce today's program. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to our viewers for joining us for this first event in the series. I personally am extremely excited about the incredible lineup of guests that we have scheduled this month. We hope to see you all for the other events in the series, which will also take place from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time each Wednesday through the end of March. They will also be available on our YouTube channel alongside all of our previous IRC Speaker Series events. Alicia mentioned our new online membership program, which is a great way to support, but you can also always make a donation to help keep our programs free and open to the broadest audience. We'll drop the link to donate in the chat. Oops, sorry. All right, so the title for today's talk is Making Medicine, Apsáalooke Conversations on Land, Water, Culture, and Art. We will be hearing from three Apsáalooke intellectuals, Nina Sanders, Ben Pease, and Jory Lafrance, in a conversation about their experiences within this new generation of Indigenous thinkers, scholars, leaders, and artists who have entered into a novel era of worldviews and creation, and as a result are faced with increasing pressure to protect their culture, their community, and most importantly, the land. Each speaker will share about their work and what it means to give back, protect, make medicine, and how these values translate to their work in museums and other cultural institutions. It is my great honor to introduce Nina Sanders, Senior Fellow at the University of Chicago Neubauer Collegium. Nina is a curator, writer, film producer, and culture consultant. She was also a 2016-2017 Anne Ray intern at the IERC and has done work for the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian and the Field Museum in Chicago, where she curated the groundbreaking exhibition Apsáalooke Women and Warriors. Nina has written for the Smithsonian Native American Art magazine and recently published Apsáalooke Women and Warriors, a scholarly publication associated with the Field Museum exhibition. Nina will be introducing our other guests, Ben Pease and Jory Lafrance. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Nina Sanders.
Shoda, everyone. It's good to be with you again, albeit virtually. I wish we were all sitting at SAR in that big, beautiful room. I can't remember exactly what the name of that huge room is. Anyway, it's good to be back at whatever capacity, and I'm going to introduce our other two guests who are also Apsáalooke, people that I deeply respect, who also happen to be my colleagues and in many ways my relatives. The first is Jory Lafrance. Jory Lafrance was born and raised on the Crow Reservation. Her Apsáalooke name is Eugene. Oh, I can't read Crow and I'm reading this. So Eugene Ma Chile, I can't say it. Oh my God. Eugene Ma Chilish. Eugene Ma Chilish, fortunate with horses. And she comes from the Greasy Mouth clan and is the child of the Tais the Bundle clan. Her last name is White Clay on the forehead, or her last name, White Clay on the forehead, comes from her great-great-great-grandfather who used white clay on his medicine when he went to battle. Joree is the 7th generation of Chief Pretty Eagle, the last principal chief of the Apsáalooke Nation and one of the first 5 Apsáalooke delegation members to travel to Washington, D.C. She graduated in June 2017 from Dartmouth College with a Bachelor of Arts in Earth Sciences and Native American Studies. She currently resides in Tucson, Arizona as a doctoral student at the University of Arizona in the Department of Environmental Sciences. Jory's research seeks to characterize and partition major sources. Okay, she wrote this. This is how brilliant she is. And so you guys just have to bear with me. Okay. Jory's research seeks to characterize and partition major sources of contaminants to understand the effects on the contaminant concentration discharge relationship of the Little Bighorn River. That sounds bad. And Apsáalooke tribal water uses on the Crow Reservation. We're going to ask her about that later. So Ms. Lafrance runs a project called Apsáalooke Voices and Stories. Through this project, she published a Crow Agency Public Schools, a book about the students there, about their Crow names and about their lives. She continuously collaborates with Apsáalooke artists and change makers for numerous community projects. Jory is dedicated to protecting the Apsáalooke way of life, the right to clean water, and the right to safe, nourishing spaces for Apsáalooke youth. Although she is away from home, Jory continues to find ways to work with and empower her people. And then Ben, we're going to ask her more about that later, obviously. Ben Pease steals the guns from two enemy camps. I'm not even going to try to read your Crow name. I'm going to have to ask you to say it yourself, both of you, please. Is a member of the Big Lodge clan and comes from the Valley of the Chiefs district and the Crow Indian Reservation. Ben is a Nighthawks Dance Society member, Sweat Lodge ceremony owner, ancestral medicine paint owner, Sundance sponsor, Sun Dancer, War Dancer, and 3-time leader of the Dance of Seasons. Ben graduated from Hardin High School and subsequently attended Minot State University on a football scholarship. At MSU, he studied under Walter Peel, a protege of the world-renowned artist Fritz Scholler. We all know him. Pease continued the pursuit of art and creativity at Montana State University, where he studied under Roland Beamish and Sarah Mast. Since then, Ben's work has gained international acclaim and national awards. His work is recognized in the Western Art Collector, Southwest Art Magazine, Fine Art Connoisseur, Cowboys and Indians, National Geographic. You kind of get where we're going there. He's amazing. Over the past 5 years, Ben has co-founded the Creative Indigenous Collective, Native Youth Art in Action, and Indigenous Peoples Day Monday. Recently, Ben Pease participated in a large-scale exhibition at the Chicago Field Museum in the University of Chicago's Neubauer Collegium. He was named Artist of the Year in 2020 from the Yellowstone Art Museum Board of Trustees after completing a 1-year residency at the museum. Pease is now Artist in Residence at Rocky Mountain College, while also serving with the Native American Outreach Program to increase Native American students' attendance. Presently, Ben is co-founding a Native American Arts Council and consulting while continuing his artistic practice. Ben and his partner, Alicia, and their 3 children, Ladis, Guana, and Alutahu. I think that's how you say it. He's gonna have to tell us again. Currently live in Billings, Montana. Next slide, please. And what brings us together, obviously, is our interest in museums, our interest in cultural work. And so just to kind of touch on our most recent body of work that all 3 of us collaborated on, in addition to and with and alongside about 18 other Apsáalooke intellectuals, artists, culture keepers, etc. Apsáalooke Women and Warriors is in Chicago until I believe July 2021, unless I can convince them otherwise. It may or may not travel. Write them a letter and tell them it needs to travel, please. We need that. And it's amazing, 6,000 square feet. It's all about Apsáalooke culture, historic objects, contemporary objects, music by Superman, one of our relatives, obviously Jory, Adam Sings in the Timber, Ben Pease, Birdie Railbird, Elias Not Afraid, Della Big Hair, Tim and Carrie McCleary, oh my gosh, Alan knows his gun. Who am I missing? Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm just gonna like randomly stop the show and like name them off if it comes to me. And so the exhibition is about our culture, but one of the most spectacular things about this exhibition is, well, there are many spectacular things. We have contemporary fashion, contemporary art by Ben Pease, a larger than life sculpture. We also have sort of the jewel of the exhibition are the Apsáalooke war shields. Please go to the next slide. The Apsáalooke war shields are part of the collection there. For the people here who are anthropologists, archaeologists, ethnographers, you know, people of that sort, I know you're out there. These are shields that were collected by a man named Sims, who was not an anthropologist and was a fieldman for the Field Museum, collected them in about 1918. They were brought to the Field Museum. They've been there since in the collection. There are 77 of them. There were more before, but they were dispersed into other collections, including Mexico City, the High Collection, which is now at NMAI, and also in Germany in various museums there. So what we have left are 77 shields at the Field Museum, and out of those, there are 7 here, and as it travels, we had intended to show 7 different shields every time the exhibition moved. And so the intent is to get this exhibition into Crow country, onto ancestral Crow land. And you know, whether or not that happens, I think that's up to the creator. And in that, and with that being said, we're going to go ahead and move into talking to Ben, because he was one of the contributors and he actually created a shield, among other things, among many, many other things. kind of as inspired from experiencing this collection with some of our elders. So I think I'm going to just start off by asking Ben a question. Apsáalooke people connect to the ultimate source of energy, as Grand Bultel would say. We share specific worldviews and participate in multiple practices that honor, reenact, and refortify these worldviews. In your intro, you shared that you participate in many of these practices. As a modern Apsáalooke man, what are some of the things you do to stay connected to your community, ancestors, knowledge systems, ultimate source of power? Can you tell us about your experience with our war shields and how your experience shaped your art? And if you consider this making medicine, there's a lot of questions there, so just do as you will.
Yeah, you all have to just bear with me because I like to make things up. So I'm glad to be here.
Me too.
Thank you, Nina, for the question. Oh, and my Apsáalooke name is pronounced Apsáalooke, as far as I know. It means steals the guns from two enemy camps or takes the guns from both sides. And today I feel like as Indigenous people, we have to walk in not only two worlds, but we have to exist in this cultural and social fluid. And so speaking for myself, I'm almost always confused about what's right and what's wrong, who makes decisions on cultural decisions or making art, or how these things combine with research or science. But in being connected to my community, I guess this past year, confronting a global pandemic, I've really made time to spend more time on the land, more time with my family, more time understanding the place of where we come from, that place of which we originate. Time going into the mountains to our sacred places and sitting and listening. And this is one of the modes that I take on for myself to sort of recharge. One night downtown Chicago, I sat with Grant Bolte along with Aaron Bryn, and we asked him a lot of questions, and we asked him about cultural questions, and we asked him about his life and his time in Vietnam. He's also a veteran, but we also asked him about what he thought about the shields. And he said that they are alive. They are these living, breathing beings, and they change just like we do as humans. And I took a lot from that experience because, we learn from those who've come before us. And so he said when he went and looked at these shields, ultimately that he was able to sort of recharge from this ultimate source of power. He equated it to sort of recharging a battery. But I thought it was really powerful that he said he was increased as a human being, and further empowered. He was more powerful after that. And how I stay connected to my ancestors is really also a very diverse answer. And so taking time to spend time on the land, but also taking time to spend in my community, spending time with members of my family, of my extended family, and my community, therefore, going to sweat, participating in ceremonies like the Sundance, and really another way that I stay connected is I try to learn as much as I can in speaking to elders, but also talking to the youth, reading as much as I can, and researching in archives around Montana and the region, and looking into digital archives. Because of the pandemic, I can't really travel very much anymore. So learning about who we were to better be able to know where we're coming from. And sort of really understanding our place in concerns to where the land lives and how the water breathes, to those relatives that aren't exactly humans, you know. And so my experience with these war shields, it was really interesting because I had this idea for many years in creating a contemporary war shield, because the only other time I've seen any contemporary war shields are at powwows, which are a contemporary formation of old time celebration ways that were outlawed. And so this is a shield that I titled Keeper of Place and Time. And it's featuring a thunderbird. And so a few years ago, I was given the traditional painting rights of Crow Scout and White Man Ransom. He was a scout for Custer before the Battle of Little Bighorn was what he was well known for. At the end of his life, he ended up giving that name, White Man Ransom, to Dr. Petzold in Lodgegrass, and then he assumed the name Morning Star. And this the shield, the imagery design comes from his medicine teepee, which is in relation to the shield that he was given by his father, Bull Chief. And so you see the lines going down the shield. Those lines are representative of hail and sleet. And they say that it's hailing and sleeting in the presence of a thunderbird. And so this is the paint that I carry. It's lines down your face. I mean, you can see it in popular culture all over. I think even Johnny Depp wore it once. And so I'm asking questions for me about appropriation of culture versus appreciation. I'm asking questions for me about how cultural entities like a paint design or like a teepee design or a story, when in fact do those become yours? When in fact do you own them, and how do you own them? What are ownership rights? What does cultural copyright look like in 2021, in the future? You know, what does a trademark look like from an Indigenous standpoint if you are trying to protect your culture? And is it fair, in fact, then to copyright your culture so that maybe people in other countries can't steal that and print it off onto coffee cups or plush blankets and sell them alongside the road? So these are some of the questions that I'm thinking about. And after getting the chance to look at these shields in the collections, I started to understand their construction. And I wanted to make a contemporary shield. And so I added the neon Thunderbird image, and then an iPad in the middle with some video design as well. And so I think this is my way of trying to get back to making medicine, because I believe that you can't at all separate culture. There's no way that you can separate culture from our art, our creativity as Indigenous people. Our creativity is irredactable and irreducible from who we are, from where we come from. And it's not, working with organizations and collectors and museums, institutions, I'm finding that it's hard for them to understand that there's not always a line. You know, you can't box everything in. And once you try to, things become stagnant. And so I'm trying to get back to a way of understanding that my visions, that as they come, those are forms of medicine, but I wouldn't say they're entirely ceremonial. I wouldn't say that they're sacred, but then again, we place more weight and value and worth on the dreams of our ancestors and our grandmothers and grandfathers than we place on ourselves, because our dreams are powerful too. Our dreams are powerful, and we have to believe in ourselves if we're going to get back to this. So I guess moving into that, I'm trying to find a way where we can work together, where we can understand how institutions can effectively work with artists and collaborate with researchers. And so I have a question actually for Jory. And Joree is an Apsáalooke woman who also happens to be a researcher and scientist. I'm pretty sure that you have this sort of love-hate relationship with data in this technological age. And you know as well as I do that we as Indigenous people, we're trudging day in and day out through this revolution of cultural interpretation. We use the tools that are available to us, just as our ancestors had done, you know, and just as the generations to come will. And due to this unquantifiable nature of Indigenous culture and belief ways, the standard scientific method doesn't always allow for cultural ideology and science to coexist. In the same way that theologies don't always make room for science. So my question lies, it's in respect of our diverse Apsáalooke spiritual economy, what methods are most successful in bridging it to Western science, or rather, what does the evolution of cultural interpretation via the scientific method look like through an Indigenous lens? And that's a long-winded question, but I think it's an important one.
Yes, aho Nina and aho Ben for that question. My Apsáalooke name is Iji in Matshush, which means fortunate with horses. And as Nina mentioned, I am a doctoral student here at the University of Arizona in the Department of Environmental Sciences. I'm specifically majoring in soil and water science, and my research is focused in the Little Bighorn Watershed. Little Bighorn River is one of our three major water resources on the reservation, and the Little Bighorn River specifically, I like to say contemporarily to this day is the only river that is in the hands of Apsáalooke people, because the headwaters begins in the Bighorn Mountains, and that the Bighorn Mountains are the center and the sole place of Apsáalooke people. I like to call the Bighorn Mountains my outside heart. And those are the mountains that brought us to the land that we now take care of. And so the Little Bighorn River, it begins in the Bighorn Mountains and it flows 11 miles north until it reaches the Wyoming-Montana state line. Then it flows only on the Crow Reservation from the Montana State-Wyoming line. And then it flows directly into the Bighorn River just before the reservation ends in Hardin, Montana. And I research that river. I collect 24 samples all along the longitudinal profile of the river. And so in this picture on the left, I'm collecting near the headwaters, near where this water is being fed by glaciers. And so you'll see these big boulders and glacial till, and this is right in the Bighorn Mountains. And I basically strategized my sampling locations based on, tribal concern, tribal community concern, but also these known contaminant hotspots. We have agriculturally developed lands all along the river, which is mostly done by non-tribal members. And then we have abandoned mines that are in the area. We have natural erosion just from the geology that's in the area that we live in. There's natural erosion that's occurring and allowing different elements to end up in the river. Some of them are harmful, some of them it's just naturally occurring. It's just normal for them to be there. But my job is to distinguish what is being or what is in the river, so we can get a better idea of how we can strategize solutions to protect this river. So Nina mentioned the concentration discharge relationship. Essentially, that means I'm trying to understand how pollutants are behaving in the river at various times of the year. So throughout the year, we know we have winter in December. We call that that's at its lowest flow. And so it's at its base flow is what we call it. And I sampled in December 2019, collected water and collected at all of my locations. And I'm testing for inorganic and organic contaminants. And then in June, I went back this past summer and collected another round of samples. So in June, when all of the snow is melted, the rains have fallen from the spring, the river is like roaring, it's at its highest, and you'll see a lot of water in the river itself. So from a hydrology and science aspect, I'm trying to understand how the flow is impacting those contaminants, and then how we can further strategize solutions with our Apsáalooke water plant, the wastewater authority, to better filter out contaminants at these differing times of the year, because we do divert water directly from the river, but also people still use the river on the regular, the water directly from the river. We still use the river for ceremonial purposes. I've been kind of keeping an eye out at all of my sample locations of the locations of sweat lodges. And I've been wanting to implement that into my work, because we've had a sweat lodge survey done before, where they basically only started in Crow Agency and went to Hardin, which is only about 13 miles in highway length, but in river length, it's maybe only like 40 miles. And they found almost 70 sweat lodges along the river. And that's not even considering the entire length of the river. So my ultimate goal with this, with my research and doing the hydrology aspect, but bringing Apsáalooke perspectives and cultural actions into it, is the end goal is to obtain treatment estate status. I'm trying to build a foundation to give the Crow tribe the capacity, or even build the team to start gaining the capacity to obtain treatment estate status under the Clean Water Act, which means that the Crow tribe can set their own water quality standards that are more stringent than state and federal EPA standards. And that's important because we have people who rely on our water resources that are above, or that are upstream of us. And as Crow people, we are senior first priority users to these water resources that are in this area. And the Bighorn River, which is a very famous river in the fishing world and in the recreational world. And so that's absolutely important for our own cultural and tribal sovereignty to stake that claim and make sure that people are abiding by our standards, because these waters have always been used by us. And we need to ensure that our children have the same access to these waters that our ancestors have. And Ben talked about it a little bit before, we play the same role as our ancestors. Sometimes we idealize our ancestors, and we think that they're, these completely different people than who we are today, but that's not the thing. As long as we're maintaining, that intention and purpose behind our work, and relying on those values and those stories that we have. One of those stories that I've relied on and have gone back to many times is the story of the 7 sacred rams. And we're not supposed to change the name of these rivers, Little Bighorn River, because of the 7 sacred rams. They're the keepers of those mountains, and they take care of these rivers. And as long as these rivers remain named after them, after the 7 sacred rams, that will remain as Apsáalooke people. And I've taken that a much deeper level in terms of maintaining the integrity and health of these waters. And it's a long road ahead, and I'm one person, but I am very fortunate to work with a team of people who are dedicated to advancing the water quality and for the accessibility to water on our reservation. And so I'm very fortunate to be doing this work, and privileged to be doing this work, and to be able to research a river that has always been there for my people. I probably spent more time explaining my research than I did talking about bringing Apsáalooke perspectives into my research, but I think that's a work in progress for me. And there's different values like imagigatua, to care and have respect for the land, and trying to find a balance between using Western technology to, in return, protect this water resource that provides so much spiritually, culturally, even just personally, just to drink. It provides so much to us. And I've had this internal dilemma for a while, but I will stop there. I do have a question for Nina. We're running out of time a little bit, but if anyone would like to ask me any more questions about this, I would be more than happy to answer. So Nina, my question for you is, so during this time, I believe that we're in a time of resurgence and reclaiming, which, as you know for sure, is very complex and substantial work. So as we continue to strengthen and become more aligned with our Apsáalooke worldviews, I'm really interested in what are the values you center as an Apsáalooke woman and what should absolutely be carried forward. I think you're on
I think
mute.
you're muted, Nina.
Okay, sorry about that. I said some really profound things you guys missed out. So yeah, Jory, I had to really think about that. And that's such a complex, complicated question because as you know, I think the Apsáalooke people are, we have the freedom to explore life and have experiences as individuals, as long as we continue to sort of abide by these core foundational belief systems, right? And going back to what Ben was talking about, the things that we participate, like Sweat Lodge, right? That's like a reoccurring part of our conversations. We've all had conversations about Sweat Lodge. And so I think the most important lessons that I've learned on how to be a good Apsáalooke woman or a good human being came from watching people work hard and be generous and pray for others at length, right? When we're sitting in the Sweat Lodge, or we're sitting anywhere where we're standing and praying at Sundance, there's a generosity, I think, that should exist in, may I be bold enough to say, all people. And it's not just about Apsáalooke women, but being a good listener and having a generosity in your spirit and understanding that giving to people, being generous with people, being generous with your gifts, it goes well beyond physical objects. It means being a good listener, showing up for someone, being on time, which I'm not, sorry everyone. And I guess in modern terms, we would say like love language, right? In my mind, when I think of really good Apsáalooke women, those women, and some are still with us and some are at other side camp. Those women were kind and they were very gentle and graceful, and they didn't judge other people, and they allowed people into their home and they fed them, but they always had good boundaries. That's something that I really appreciate about like a strong, resilient Apsáalooke woman, is that they have boundaries and that they can say, absolutely not, hell no. But they can also help you and be there with you in ways that you really just sometimes can't even comprehend as maybe a child or a person who's younger. And so I had to really think about the good Apsáalooke women in my life. And those women are hardworking and they're gentle with other human beings, but firm when they need to be and strong. That resilience is manifest only when it needs to be manifest. And I think that there's sort of a brilliance or a conscience that exists in Indigenous women, maybe just in women, where it's almost like, you know when to be gentle and you know when to be firm. And I think those things require quite a bit of balance and thoughtfulness. And I say for myself, the ways that I've tried to find that balance, maintain that balance, because it's always work, is by being a better listener. Beadwork helps me to recenter, absolutely. Running, just going outside and being in the sun and praying, speaking to the sun, speaking to my spirit helpers, the ultimate, and the center of the universe, the ultimate source of energy. Yeah, so I think, you know, there isn't any one way to be for any particular person or Apsáalooke woman, but I think that there are some qualities in all of the different mothers that I've had as a child and growing up, and even to this day, who've shown me what it looks like to be a good human being and make a serious contribution in sharing the gifts that were given by the Creator, like true amajigitwa, to care for all things. Yeah, and that I think that transcends being a woman. I think that's just people. So, I think, do we have time for another question between the three of us? I don't know that everybody asked one, and do we need to go to questions? We've got a couple more minutes. I think I want to ask Jory. Oh no, yeah. Can you share with us what compels your dedication in protecting women and the water? And what can Apsáalooke people do to revitalize our responsibility to the water and our women? How can we make new medicine?
Yes, so most of my work revolves around water, our water resources, and Apsáalooke women. And so I'm not sure if everyone is aware of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls epidemic that is currently happening and is a crisis in Indian country. And in Montana specifically, we have been hit pretty hard with this epidemic. And my people, Apsáalooke people in Bighorn County, we have been hit the hardest, unfortunately. And although Indigenous people in Montana only make up 6% of the population, Bighorn County Crow Reservation makes up most of Bighorn County. And it's a little bit of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, but the majority of it is the Crow Reservation. And we make up 26% of the missing and murdered Indigenous women cases or reported cases in the entire state of Montana. And that's alarming. And even within the past 18 months, we've had 3 Apsáalooke girls who were reported missing and then later found deceased. And on the right here on the photo is late Selena Not Afraid, who was reported missing on New Year's Day and then found 20 days later, less than a mile away from where she was last seen. And you know, I've been through some personal things related to MMIW that just made this specific case extremely hard to take, extremely hard. And the only way for me to, relieve or, remediate any kind of sadness or anger is to do action or to make other people feel good and feel loved and supported. And I think that comes with, a magic tool, taking care of all my relatives, taking care of my sisters, my mothers and my khalas, and, not only within my own family, but with, other family. We all make up Apsáalooke society, and Apsáalooke society is absolutely important to me and all my work that I do. And so I try to do everything I can to advance Apsáalooke people, whether that's just giving them, a simple resource that they can take forward or giving them good words or something. And so I knew that I wanted to do something in my community to help with this. And I collaborated with Bethany Yellowtail, who is the founder and owner of Be Yellowtail. And we put our heads together to create this healing workshop, who we reached out to other organizations like the Native Wellness Institute, who's done incredible work in healing, trauma healing. And we fundraised money, and we provided this healing workshop for women or, anyone. Ben was there. We had a community members come in, and we did a workshop and just did work on trauma and healing and just having conversations and being open, and created the safe space for them. And I think the only way for us to fully move forward and to do this work is we need to be taken care of individually. We need to heal from, whatever traumas or whatever we're going through, because we're all going through things, but it's our responsibility to heal. Even though those things might not always be our fault, it's our own responsibility to heal. And so I just done what I can to provide spaces for people to do that work or to start that work. Although it's a very complex and long work that needs to be done, I think it's my responsibility because I have resources at my disposal and have the ability to do and write and, you know, fundraise and do these things and bring back to my community. I'm gonna do these things. And I think that's what's, I do this research, this PhD research, and but I think most of the fire that I get to continue this work comes from, you know, the love of my people and giving back to them and doing things for them. I just, like, I cannot not do other community work on the side. I always get, you know, questioned about, you're in a PhD program, why are you doing this project, but it's just, I have to, that's just something that's a part of me. We're a community that gives back. We're people that always give back to, when we accomplish something, we give back to the people who prayed for us. Or even when we're going off to a new school or a new horizon, we give back to the people that are going to pray for us. So we're a community and people who always give back. And that's just something that it's just something that I inherently know. And my research gives back. I want to give back to our future generations doing this work now to ensure that we have clean water. And then doing this work now to ensure that our women are feeling loved, safe, healthy, and to know that they can do whatever they want to do and be unapologetically Apsáalooke on the land that we live and that we're taking care of. So I have one more question. I think we have time for one more. So Ben, I'm particularly interested in your individual method and your thought process when you make your art. I mean, you make some incredible, incredible art. I hope to have your art in my house one day, keeping my fingers crossed. And so given that your work, most of your work reflects Apsáalooke worldviews and people, our ancestors themselves, can you speak a little about how you gain inspiration, justifying your process and your final decisions, and then how you feel about where your final pieces end up? Because I don't think they end up in real houses.
Right. No, not always. That's a good point though. You know, why do I have to make art that isn't ultimately for our people or our community? It's a big question. And ultimately I started out doing that. And there's one in Nina's house, so take that, Joree.
It's snatched though.
Ultimately, I
give it
started out
back.
doing that. I started painting portraits of people's namesakes, like Medicine Crow behind me here, or Curly on the other side here. Sorry, I'm mixed up on which side is which, but and it started with $400 for my first painting, and you can sort of find out more about that if you want. And it just sort of kept snowballing. I realized, a kid from the res that never had any money, you know, now I could buy my own shoes. You know, now I could take out girlfriends for dinner and stuff like that. And it was amazing. First time I'd ever had money. So it got fast and I got away from it really, really easily. But now, you know, I'm lucky enough to be in a place where I can make the work that I want to, the work that fulfills me, the work that I think is for Crow people. And so like this painting behind me on this side, right here, you can see the Little Horn River, and sort of on the other side is Lodgegrass Creek over here. And this is where they come together. That's the confluence. If that's the correct term, Joree, you have to let me know. But this is based on some oral history from our people, telling about Chief Medicine Crow, who was one of those transitionary chiefs on the reservation. You know, in the times when cultures sort of collided, and they didn't always meet up, and sometimes they worked together, sometimes they didn't. You know, out of that, people kept saying, out of those transitionary times, people always said, crows can't farm. Those savages aren't farmers. You can't civilize them. And that's existed into today, but that's a fallacy. It's just not true. But when I'm making my art, I tend to ask myself questions, and after question after question until I get solidified. I turn into a statue, a big, dumb, ugly statue, and I can't move. And I keep asking, is this okay? I ask one elder and they say it's okay. And on the other hand, I ask another elder, and they say, no, you shouldn't do that. And it's tough to try to understand what is right and what is wrong. Ultimately, am I creating a product for a market, or am I creating a vision and giving it life? Do I walk the line of trying to provide for my family, or am I just making money, monetizing it, like our ceremonies have been monetized and generalized and romanticized? And should culture limit creativity? In some ways, yes, and in a lot of other ways, no, because our creativity is a part of our existence, like I said before. Anything that we do is part of us. I was on another webinar with Superman, Christian Parrish Takes the Gun. And I asked him a similar question because he's an artist, right? And I said, what is Indigenous creativity? What is Apsáalooke creativity to you? And he said, shoot, anything I do is Apsáalooke. If I make an Apsáalooke cheeseburger, that's an Apsáalooke cheeseburger, anything, he said. And is my art more sacred than another Native artist's today or tomorrow or 150 years ago? That's a big question for me. Like I said, do we value our dreams less or more than those of our ancestors or those of our children? There's a lot to be said there. It's easy to become the token Indian. It's easy to get boxed in. It's easy to be pigeonholed as an Indian artist, but I think we have to find out where our intention lies, because that's important. If you want to just continue painting Indians in headdresses, or Indians on horses in their natural habitat, that's okay. I'm not the culture police, but it's fine. So I could go on for about 25 hours on that question. Do we have time for one more? No?
I think we might, we should answer some questions because we only have like 5 minutes.
Okay. Fuzz.
Everybody's sick of hearing me talk anyway, so.
Everyone, I think we have about 35 more minutes, but I think it would be fun to get into the audience questions if you all are okay with that. So I wanted to start with this one, which I think is really important. Meredith Schweitzer commented, what a great conversation. If someone wants to support the causes that Joree was speaking about, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the works of creating my own organization to continue to do this work, but it's a work in progress. But there are many organizations to go to. The first one that comes to my mind is the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, which is housed in Lame Deer, Montana, and their work is more national in Indian country. And then we have, oh gosh, what is it? I think it's Sovereign Bodies Institute. That's another one who is doing work related to MMIW. But as far as specific work on the Crow Reservation, it's more of individual fundraising, individual efforts, family efforts. So there are families who are still fundraising actually and asking for petitions. Another case we had was Sarah Stops Pretty Places. They're fundraising for her, and a petition needs to be signed to get justice for her. And that happened in Bighorn County. And so I can put links in the chat to give you direct access to them.
Great, we can work on that as well. I think the org you mentioned was National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. So we'll work on getting that in the chat for our audience members. And then I had a question actually, which I think is similar to what Susan Howard has asked here, but I think it's just amazing that you all came together with such a broad range of expertise and experience to create Apsáalooke Women in Warriors. Can you speak a little bit more about what that process was like and what a community-based exhibition that's grounded in Indigenous values signifies for an institution like the Field?
Do either of you want to give that a go?
Go
Ben?
ahead. This is your question.
I'm gonna hand it off to you guys, but so just specifically, Jory organized, she organized a part of the exhibition that was the photography, the contemporary photography component that was executed by Adam Sings in the Timber and organized, planned, produced by Jory. Jory selected all of the women based on their own sort of characteristics, merit, contributions to Apsáalooke society. And then Adam took the photos. That's one of the most spectacular parts of the exhibition, actually. And some of those photographs were turned into like tote bags and cups and things like that, speaking to Ben's conversation about kind of appropriation. And but if you want to drink a cup of coffee with my grandmother on it every morning, go to the website and buy it, because I do, it helps me. And then Ben, obviously Jory made a contribution to the catalog, which was published by the Neubauer Collegium at the University of Chicago, where there was another exhibition. They were tandem, it was a collaboration, and we all made contributions to every part. So Jory wrote for the catalog, Ben, he contributed multiple pieces of art, several paintings. One of the paintings was actually used to create the banners that are on, I believe, the north side of the building. As you're driving south on Lakeshore, you can see these huge banners. I think there's like 5 of them. And it's, what is it, under the cliffs, under the sacred cliffs?
Under the cliffs of the Yellowstone.
Yeah. And I will let them speak to that briefly, unless there's another very pressing question. We only have a little bit of time. I think it's the whole thing eventually should become some sort of symposium where we can all speak and address our experiences at the Field Museum, because some were absolutely glorious at the University of Chicago as well. And others were not pleasant. And that's an entirely different conversation. Obviously, having a group of people from one community, one tribe, come in and make multiple creative contributions and offer guidance to people who absolutely need it is very complicated work. And it's not always done. There isn't a guide to it. So, maybe hopefully one day, one of our listeners, if they're student, if they're young, if they're museology native, start thinking about a best practices guide on native and institution collaborations. So yeah, lots of work there to be done. I think this conversation is a huge part of that. So Ben or Jory, I don't know, I'll hand this off.
Definitely a lot of differences, and learning to work in such a structurized, sometimes at times quite rigorous method when coming from a tribal community it doesn't always work together. It's like water and oil, from the museum people asking, why do crows walk so slow, to trying to understand what my art is, how it's dictated in a contract, because it's not just art, because it's not just setting a value to an inanimate object, because there's deeper things than that. So it does definitely need to be a longer form dialogue, at which point we'll be able to delve into these and really dissect them. So go ahead, Jory.
Yeah, I think you both touched on pretty much the majority of what I've experienced. I mean, you two are more in the art museum world. I was just kind of project, writing what I needed to do, right? Did what I needed. But definitely from an outsider's perspective, not being involved in anthropology and museums, a lot of work does need to be done, especially working with tribal communities and just right down to basic etiquette, how to greet people, how to speak to people. I mean, with younger generations, we can take it a little better, but when you disrespect our elders, that's a no-go. When you disrespect, you know, the people that we bring in, that totally is a detriment to the entire situation and the relationship going forward. But thankful for people like Nina, who can advocate for our needs and on our behalf in those types of settings, which is difficult work, I must say.
Thank you all. That's great. Yeah, I definitely think it's an important conversation and we could stay on here for hours talking about it. Let's see, we have a couple of questions from John Boudreau. So I'm just going to ask one here because we have some other questions to get to. So John says, thank you all so much for all you're doing. Best wishes that you, your families, friends, and colleagues are all safe in these challenging times. And then this really relates to what you all have just been speaking about. He asks, I would be particularly interested in the contrast between the traditional approach to museums when well-meaning, often white people try to tell a certain story with artifacts or museum objects versus when the museum turns over the space and story to the people whose culture produced those objects.
I have an interesting response to that. So in sitting in the room that late night with the late Grand Botel, Aaron Bryn and I, we asked him about these shields and the power that they carry and who owns them. And he said the Field Museum owns them. They own them and the power because they bought them. They were transferred. There was an energy transfer that occurred in 1901 to 1903. And he said, but we're still related to them. You know, we still garner energy from them. And I thought that was really interesting because going through the collections with Nina and Jory and the rest of the community who came to visit the Field Museum, who were lucky enough, at times it felt like we were trying to work in our way and the Field Museum was working in their way. So we almost got in each other's way in trying to be with these objects, you know. And it was just really interesting. So there does need to be a best practices in working with Indigenous communities. And I'll let Nina and Jory continue that, but I think that's interesting. So thank you for the question.
Bam Shivala, Jory.
Go ahead.
So John has lots of questions. I see them over here on the side. So, and I'm looking now at what Laura just said. So yes, the guidelines for collaboration. So for everybody who's listening, who is not familiar with the School for Advanced Research, the Indian Arts Research Center formulated a group and carried out this incredible task that took years in the making and brought together some of the foremost culture leaders, culture keepers, museum specialists to create the guidelines. And they're available online, School for Advanced Research. I imagine they'll share the link with you. And in those guidelines, there are some of those best practices. However, because you know, there aren't any real like mandates in museums or policies where Indigenous people have sat down with the board and policymakers and human resource all across the institution. We're always just sort of niche or guests or, you know, just consultants, right? There isn't really space for us anywhere, whether it's intellectual space, physical space. And so when we come into these spaces as Indigenous people, we're asking individuals who went to school their entire lives to do this work. And it's an incredibly professional, rigorous position to take care of objects, to plan an exhibition. It absolutely requires a great deal of schooling. And because we've been removed from them for so long, the objects, the shields, we'll say the shields in this instance, there's a lot of healing and communicating to be done between the individuals that are there convening over the object, the shield, and then between the people in the shields themselves. And that's delicate business. It can't be done quickly. And when there's maybe keys and lockers involved, and every time you do something, you have to sign a paper, the more technical and sterile that process becomes in that reunification process between Indigenous people and these belongings, their friends, ancestors. Maybe sometimes it's just art. Maybe sometimes they are actual sacred objects that are living and breathing. That has to be taken very seriously, very, very seriously. As seriously as maybe even the way that the institution imagines gift giving and nonprofit work and fundraising and marketing. Absolutely. Equally as important, more important. This is the work of human beings to be better people, to start rethinking the society we live in and how defunct it's become, and how we prioritize policies in many instances, not saying all of them are bad, over healing, the healing of trauma, the reunification of Indigenous people and these things that are lost to them in some way. And fortunately for us at the Field Museum, space was made. Was it awkward? Absolutely. Did everybody get along with each other? No. But more often than not, people connected and built relationships. And there are many people in the Field Museum who are very close to many of us in the Apsáalooke community. For the rest of our lives, we will absolutely see many of those people that we worked with at Crow Fair, at Native Days, at our camps. And that's what we want. We want to build relationships. Apsáalooke people want to build relationships. This is how we've always been. If you look at some of the oldest colonial Western texts or journals that were written by French explorers, they talk about how the Crow people were incredibly friendly and curious and willing to trade and exchange language and experiences. And this is a consistency across time. And so we had to learn about one another, and trying to do that in a period of 9 months, which is how long it took us to build that exhibition. It was an incredible feat. I would like to say that I think we did a really good job considering how little experience the Field Museum had in working with an entire community, multiple Native artists, some of them the most successful, renowned artists in the world, Kevin Red Star, right? Incredible people who've been in Vogue magazine, Superman. These people are professionals, right? But all of us, the one thing we have in common is our commitment to our community, to each other, to our people, and we overcame our egos in most instances. And so I think, and then on the other side, the Field Museum, the people we worked very closely with did the same. The people we didn't work as closely with, that work was a little bit more difficult. And there's areas that I don't know if I have any hope for indigenizing, which is like marketing. Marketing was a serious, marketing needs work. So if you guys have any experience in marketing, yeah, that's an area to explore. So that being said, it's hard work. We're passionate about it. I think if institutions would make the commitment to do this sort of work where you bring in an entire community, and then they have to figure out how to just sort of work together and bring forth their most creative, brave-hearted individuals, you'll make something magnificent. Will it be perfect? No. Will it be the last thing you create? No. But this is how we heal our communities. This is how we heal each other and ourselves. So we're doing it, we're hopefully the Field Museum will continue with this relationship that we've begun to build with them. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That was a beautiful response. And thank you to Laura for reminding me to mention the guidelines for collaboration, which Molly dropped the link in the chat for all of you all. It's a great starting place. And then just some kind words from one of our audience members, Jai Lakshman. I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. They commented that listening on this Zoom feels like being welcomed into the heart of the most beautiful living prayer. Thank you one and all for the power of your good words and palpable blessings of the ancestors and creator you each so respectfully carry and hold. Thank you. Let's see, and we have a lot of questions in here, and so I don't know if we'll be able to make it to them all, but I will try. Here is the next one from Nicholas Lowe. Nicholas asks, I'm interested in the ways the idea of research might be understood differently in relation to your work. How do you feel about research?
That's a good Jory question, I think.
Yeah, make sure I'm not on mute. Actually seems like a loaded question. So when I think about, right here. So when I first came to the University of Arizona, or when I first thought about obtaining a secondary education beyond my bachelor's, whether that be a master's or a PhD, I knew that the work and the research that I wanted to do had to be related to my people or make some sort of effort to advance my people. It didn't sit right with me. It still doesn't sit right with me, even in my internships or my other fellowships. All of my work has to involve some sort of advancement or effort to move my people forward, whether that be Apsáalooke people specifically or Native people. And I've been in different capacities where I've been able to work on broader projects that relate to Native people, but I always try to center it back to Apsáalooke people. And I think when I approached my research question, I had to think about my own relationship to the water, to this river, and then really think about the goals of what I wanted to do with this research and how I can, one, use the tools that are at my disposal in, Western science, Western technology, because I'm in the Department of Environmental Sciences. I do use instruments to read and detect contaminants that we can't see with our naked eye. There's all of these aspects of Western technology and science that are in my research, but I always do my best to bring that back to who I am as an Apsáalooke person. And we've kind of touched on it before. There are some things that we just can't indigenize, it is what it is. And it really comes back down to that intention and that purpose behind your work, those values and those morals that you keep with you as you do this work. And I've often found that, unconsciously, I've been, remaining as an Apsáalooke person within this work. So when I go sample, I feed my clan and to my clan uncles to pray for me. I feed the river before I even go into the river. And I do all these things that we do as Apsáalooke people before, like these protocols, just to ensure that I'm safe, because, we're not supposed to be at the river, during the winter. There's we have certain times and certain protocols for these things. And so I knew that I was having to, perform methods at different times of the year. and actually taking water away from the river itself too. Like that was also another aspect of the research that I really had to sit with myself and really think about too. And then just, you know, praying and being very intentional and mindful of the work that I'm doing. And I think that's what really has kept me going in this research, because it's the learning the technology, these skills, the bench science, working in a lab, these are all skills that are very necessary to the work that I do, but aren't the things that necessarily keep me going. And it's, you know, the work I do for my people that keep me going, the relationships that I build with the river, with the mountains, the land that I'm on, because I'm on the land, I'm in the field the entire time. And this is, you know, the river is all I've ever known. And I'm doing everything that I can to ensure that I'm showing and respecting the river, but also fulfilling my responsibility to that river and to future generations.
Thank you for that, Jory. I have another question of my own. The development of this exhibition was so deeply collaborative. I'm just curious about how or what it was like to have the opening occur against the backdrop of a pandemic and how that affected your ability to connect the museum to your community.
I have a quick answer to that. It was stress, like just stress that induced extreme anxiety, because we call it the Chicago 50. There's an actual hashtag on social media, hashtag Chicago 50. And there were actually more like 70 Apsáalooke people there. And age ranges from like unborn babies to elders, you know, people who are almost 90 years old. And some of these elders are so incredibly courageous that at the behest of their own family members, they still were like, absolutely not. This is like an experience of a lifetime, I'm going. And I think that for me personally, as an individual, it was, I kind of imagine it was something that one of our ancestors probably experienced, you know, being in the middle of something so grand and eventful and meaningful, and spiritual even, but also like being terrified that someone would get sick. But miraculously enough, nobody in the Chicago 50, the Apsáalooke people, went home and they were safe and nobody fell ill. Much later, several months later, actually, people did fall ill. But however, beyond that, fascinatingly enough, there were things planned into this exhibition that became tools that we were able to utilize to connect people to it in different ways. And one of them was the creation story animation. That became a really great tool for parents who are trying to teach at home. And then, so we had all these different sort of digital assets, video. The University of Chicago, the Neubauer Collegium, they actually have a really beautiful video on their website. So if you go Apsáalooke Women and Warriors, University of Chicago, you'll find it there. And there's multiple videos on that website actually. So there was so much activity going on. I think that for me, it was difficult to process other than anxiety. But later on in hindsight, it was a miraculous experience. It's almost as if we closed out or sort of in some ways celebrated the closing of an old way of life. Yeah, and that's bittersweet in many ways. And then interestingly enough, you know, we lost a lot of our elders, I think across Indian country, in the world, probably, absolutely. And so it made us a lot more thoughtful. I think going into the quarantine, I can't speak for every Apsáalooke person, but most of them who contributed in their conversations was, what can we do to continue this work? How can we continue to protect our culture and our language and tell stories and re-engage with these things that are in museum collections? So yeah, we were fortunate. We were incredibly fortunate. We still are, to be at the very end of that and to be able to parade through communities without masks and dance like hand in hand with people. We two-stepped in the grand hall of the Field Museum. Yeah, and who knows if we'll ever be able to do that again. So,
Thank you for that. Let's see. Someone is requesting a link to the videos. Molly, if you could share those, that would be amazing. I think we're looking for the tour, which I believe I saw on the Field Museum website, and then the creation story video. And the creation story video was animated by Jason Garcia, is that correct? One of our past
yes,
fellows?
it was actually, sorry.
Oh, okay, great. So yeah, that was a fun connection. I hope you all get a chance to watch it. Let's see, I think we're winding down here, but this is a great question from Kelly McHugh. They ask, or they say, thank you for this conversation. We know museums can be places of trauma given the legacy of collecting. I was struck by Jory's efforts to create healing spaces. Do you think museums can transform into spaces of healing, and what would that look like ideally?
Do you, I think either Ben or Nina is gonna have to speak on this, especially in museum or institutions like that. That's not my forte, so I'm giving you the floor.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say hi, Kelly, but I think Ben he could speak to that.
No, go ahead, Nina. It's all good. You're totally prepared.
Okay, can you repeat? That was like a long question and I thought it was directed at Jory, so I guess you can reiterate the last part of it.
Yeah, I think their question was based off of Jory's intention of creating healing spaces through her work. And so they're asking, how can museums become spaces of healing given this history?
Okay, I see. Not really. It's like going to the hospital, you know? I mean, I think for most Native people, even when you go in there and you're like, I'm going to see the most beautiful elk tooth dress that's ever been created, and I'm with my sisters. When you go into those vaults downstairs, upstairs, wherever, and you have to go through layers and layers of security, there isn't a freedom to breathe or exist or be free there. Yeah, those things are entombed, they're, sleeping, they're all sort of the objects themselves, our ancestors, whatever. They are having an experience, and there's really no way for us to engage with them other than in very brief, miraculous moments. I like to, and I'm a very spiritual thinker, so I imagine they wished us there, because that's what I would do. If someone took me and put me away, far, far away from my land, the foundation of everything that we are, our mother, our family, I think I would probably wish and pray and use whatever energy I have left in this existence to re-manifest my people back to me. So in that, I guess healing is different things for different people. So there may be instances where in a museum or in one of those spaces, like if you're talking about a culture center created by a tribe, that's different. We're talking about the Field Museum, any of the Smithsonian's, the Met, whatever that place is. I think it's a place for healing for the people who work there. and for human beings, and in spaces where exhibitions exist. But in Indigenous people entering those spaces to re-experience or reconnect with their loved ones, I don't know if that's the most ideal place.
Ben, I would love to hear from you as an artist and
Yeah.
someone who creates work that lives in these spaces.
So thank you. Definitely a question that needs to be fleshed out on a greater platform. Just a few examples, and I don't know if it'll make any real change, but when I was creating this large 12 or 13-foot sculpture, I was allowed to be a part of the design process and how it was presented and displayed and conserved, and then dictated in the contract, like I was talking about earlier. And so that is one way that we can make things more accessible to Native artists and their families and other people, other makers. The second example is when we did in fact go through those layers and layers of security, showing our badges to everybody, you know, like a backstage pass. We got back to the shields and we were kind of laughing and making jokes, and we said, hey, why not laugh? Because these things were created by humans, right? And I think we talked about this earlier, but these things haven't heard human laughter for decades, almost over a century, you know. And we thought it was a good thing for them to also be recharged by us in our presence. Making a time and place to do that is what I think institutions could do for Native peoples. And they did in fact allow us to smudge and to pray in the way that we did it, albeit it wasn't near the objects. It was a separate room for conservation purposes. But yeah, those are my two examples. Take them for what they're worth.
Great, thank you. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so I just have a couple of comments here that I wanted to share with you all, and then I think we can wrap it up. But thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. So Margot Ernst just wanted to share that the NMAI's Cultural Resource Center has places in the museum to work with pieces and use sweetgrass, and so that's a great suggestion of a model that we can look to. So thank you, Margot. And then Shalia Ben comments, first step in museums in regards to creating spaces is making the public programming intentional to assist in healing Indigenous communities with the current settler community that supports museums. Just my 2 cents, you're rocking it, Nina. I agree. Lots of folks saying thank you, great job. And then we had a really nice comment from Laura Sullivan that I wanted to read. Laura says, we have so much to learn from all of you and from each other. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and honesty. And I definitely echo Laura's sentiments. So thank you so much for your time. This has been a really great, inspirational conversation. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Your
turn, Joy.
All right, so thank you all for coming, and I encourage you to attend our next event next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can find the information on our website. Thank you.